I can't believe this is already our 5th year doing this. So it's been a while since I last saw you in May. Had a couple of months off. I hope you had a wonderful summer. Tonight, we're really excited to hear from Julie Dussliere, President and CEO of the Purdue for Life Foundation, who will be sharing her incredible journey. But before we dive in, let's just give maybe a few more minutes for others to join the call. And if you could go ahead and type in the chat if you haven't already. As Jillian said, let us know where you're calling in from. Number 2, a yes if you've attended Cocktails and Conversation. And 3, since our guest tonight is all about Olympic moments, could you let us know what your Olympic moment is? So 3 questions, everyone. Please tell us where you're calling in from, a yes if you've attended Cocktails and Conversation, and your favorite Olympic moment. So while you do that, I just wanted to give a few notes about this Zoom event this evening. We are trying a new Zoom webinar platform. Love to get your feedback on it. I think the biggest changes that you will see is that the cameras will not be on. You won't be able to turn your cameras. And Sugar, chime in if you think of something else. But I think that for us was the biggest one, especially since you know me at the end. I like to do the selfies moments, etc., and like to see everybody in there. Whatever you're wearing is showing me your cocktail. So just let us know what you think about this new Zoom webinar feature. So reminders, attendees will be muted upon entry. If you have a question or a comment or need technical assistance, just let us know by putting it in the chat. And we are recording tonight's event, and your consent is acknowledged by staying in our session. So let's see what you all had to say tonight. Okay, I see that. Please, okay, make sure that the Zoom links are more easily available. Hi, Danita. Thanks for joining us this evening. Bridget, thank you for calling from West Lafayette. You've got someone calling in, like we mentioned earlier, from Phoenix, 102 right now. Goodness. Kathy, nice to see you again. Debbie Cook from Indy, Martha from Fairfax. And hi, Sugar. Joanne, you're feeding your girls. I hear that. Lisa, Amy from Cincinnati. Thanks, everyone. Let's see what some of the stories that you've got here. The 1500 women's swimming final, Kimberly said. U.S. men's hockey, figure skating, swimming. Okay, I think this is music to Julie's ears, guys. And so Kirsten said, Zionsville, no, this is my first. Excited to be here. Well, we're excited to have you here, Kirsten. Thank you so much. U.S. hockey. Someone remind me when the next Olympics is. Oh my gosh, I should know this. Okay. Jillian says, I used to dream when I was an ice skater while watching my first Olympics at age 4. Oh, that's sweet, Jillian. Thank you. Hey, Courtney, I love that you're in the house tonight. Okay, Champagne. I wish I could see you in the freaking baby. Carmel, yes, favorite Olympic, Peggy Fleming. Yeah, 1968. Women's gymnastics. Julie and Jillian, I hope you're seeing all this. A lot of people have some wonderful stories to share about their favorite Olympic moment. So thank you for sharing. Really, it's going to be a fun evening getting to hear from Julie about everything Olympics. Here we go. Let's go ahead and continue. So my name is Murray Whipple. I'm the Senior Director of Affinity Networks. And together with Stephanie Bonebreak, Amira or Sugar Liana, and Tony Johnson, we make magic happen through Affinity Networks. These QR codes link us back to our LinkedIn account. Just in case you're not connected with us, connect with us. You'll find a lot more about Affinity Networks via our social media posts. And here we go. Just a little bit about Affinity Networks before we dive in to our session this evening. So Affinity Networks, we have 12 Affinity Networks with 19 boards and about 150 volunteers who help us organize about 80 to 100 events per year. Our Affinity Networks focuses on mentorship, philanthropy, and engagement. Because of the sheer size of the Women's Network, we've divided it into volunteer-led events and staff-led events. So as you can see here in the middle, on the slide, middle picture, the volunteer-led events are led by our amazing volunteers in the cities of Chicago, Greater Lafayette, Indianapolis, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Houston, and Ann Arbor. For the signature events, that's my team leading these initiatives, and they include tonight's Cocktails and Conversation that happens from September through May, the fall luncheon happening this year on October 24th, the day before homecoming. If you haven't already, please register for this event. It's going to be an amazing event honoring victories and heroines. So again, it's on October 24th, the day before homecoming. And we've got the Naples Brunch, the Women's History Month, the Women's Conference, which will take place June 24th and 25th in Indianapolis this year, and then the Women's Trip, which the date varies. As you can see on this next slide, the women have been very busy planning a bunch of activities this fall. So all this you can see are in pink, but I just wanted to highlight a few. We've got puppy yoga happening in Houston this weekend. We have pickleball in Ann Arbor. We have Cocktails and Conversation with author Angie Klink next month. We have, again, the fall luncheon at the Union on October 24th. And again, the Women's Conference is set for June 24th and 25th in Indianapolis next year. Okay. So to kick off our 5th year of Cocktails and Conversation, we are excited to welcome Julie, President and CEO of the Purdue for Life Foundation. Julie will share her trailblazing journey as the first woman to lead the Americas Paralympic Committee, her impactful work as a Senior Vice President of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and her lifelong love of Purdue, ultimately leading her back to West Lafayette. She will be interviewed by Jillian Henry, the Chief Engagement Officer for the Purdue for Life Foundation. Let's all please welcome 2 incredible women with a virtual round of applause. Julie, Jillian, thank you.
Thanks so much, Maria. So we'll go ahead and get started here in just a second, but I wanted to let you all know that we are dealing with a new platform this evening. So if things look a little different, they are. We're trying out a webinar feature with Zoom. And so one of the things that means for us is that we're adjusting to seeing how this works for everyone, as well as making sure that we're having a good experience on the back end, on the front end. So I've already looked in the comments. I miss seeing people's faces too. That's something that Julie and I were talking about earlier. So know that we are trying something different, and we will get back with you on whether this format works or not, but we're going to give it a try for tonight. So bear with us. We do have a time for questions. And so I would say if something strikes your mind as a question you'd like to ask of Julie, go ahead and drop that into the chat. Maria and Sugar are going to be monitoring that on the back end for us. And then I've got several questions for Julie as well. So we've got some fun things planned for you tonight, and we're looking forward to hearing from you and hearing from our CEO, Julie Dussliere. So Julie, I'm going to start off with a good question for you, because you are a proud Boilermaker. You are also an Old Master. You are also a student athlete, or were a student athlete. It seems only natural that you're part of the Purdue family now on staff. And so it's been about a year, and we did a similar conversation, and some of the ladies that are on here tonight, they may have been with us in Naples shortly after you started. So last February, I asked some similar questions, but you had just gotten started then. So it's been almost a year. How has your year been? Tell us a little bit about what's been most memorable or most inspiring since you started in this role as our new CEO.
Thanks for the question, Jillian. It's a great one. And I think the most fun and the most important thing over this past year has been the relationship building, whether it's rekindling relationships with fellow alums or faculty and staff on campus who I was familiar with or knew before I got back to campus in this role, or meeting new people, whether our staff at Purdue for Life, alums, donors, students. Incidentally enough, some of the most fun things I think I've done over this past year are a lot of the events around campus. And you mentioned Old Masters. I was an Old Master back in 2020 and experienced that program from the alum side of things. It's fun to say that we have been working with this year's 2 student co-chairs from the Purdue for Life perspective to help them implement what will be the 75th anniversary of Old Masters later this fall. So seeing it from the operational side, working with those students has been a lot of fun. Obviously, I've enjoyed a lot of our events around campus, whether there are Purdue for Life events like Naples Week or Grandparents University, and athletic events. Incidentally, and probably no surprise, the first athletic event I went to back on campus last fall was the home opener for men's and women's swimming and diving. But have spent a lot of time at volleyball, football, basketball, golf, and other sports as well throughout the year. But obviously, my first love is always swimming and diving, so I had to go to one of their events first.
Nice. Well, yeah, you've definitely been busy. So, and this is one of the best times to be on campus too, being in the fall and just seeing the students come back. And so, yeah, I think it's been a great year too, working with you. So, um, because you are only the second CEO for Purdue for Life, it also means you're the first woman, but that doesn't mean that this is not your first foray into being a first woman leader. So when you were with the Americas Paralympic Committee, you were the first woman to lead the Americas, not just North America, but North and South America. Um, and being the first in something is always challenging. So tell us a little bit about that experience, and what that means to you being a first woman leader, not only there, but also here.
Yeah, the Americas Paralympic Committee role was interesting. It was a great learning experience. Not only was I the first woman to lead that organization, but I was also the first individual from the United States. And I think the second one was probably harder than the first one now that I look back at it. But it was really an opportunity to use my international relations skills, which those who know me know that that's a passion of mine and actually what I wanted to be when I grew up a long, long time ago. Wanted to work in that space in international relations and diplomacy. Being a facilitator, being a relationship builder, moderating conversations, sort of from a light in just example, the entire board, when I was on it, not only was I the only female, but most of them were from Latin America. Quite a few of them were from either Cuba or Colombia. And I had to try to get the point across in Spanish that we were going to do things by the rules. We were a US 501(c)(3), so did our banking in the US and Canada. And a lot of my Colombian colleagues came from the culture where banking was done with cash and suitcases, and right, trying to convince them that we needed to do business in a different way from an international perspective was definitely a challenge and a learning experience. I think the legacy there was providing opportunities for all women in sports. Fortunately, at the time on the board, our athlete rep was also a female, so she was right breaking ground as the athlete rep and a female athlete rep on that board the same time I was as the president. And she and I worked really closely together to try to do programs specifically for women in sport, whether it was getting more females into officiating or coaching or athlete clinics. And I think both of us, if we looked back today, would say we were proud of the legacy we left there, and a lot of the women that still work in that environment who had those opportunities because we made that a focus when we were on the board. But I think it translates into my leadership at Purdue as well. It's about giving back. It's about being passionate for the mission. It's about working with everyone, male, female, in our environment to support what we love and do what we do best.
Absolutely. So I know many that are joining us online have not heard you speak before. And, anytime you hear something about the Olympics, it's something that everyone has exposure to. And I think everyone is really interested into kind of pulling back that curtain a little bit. Give us just an insider's look. What was it like to be in the games?
Well, no 2 days are ever the same. And I was thinking today, knowing that we always talk about this in different environments because there's so many stories I can tell. Some that I probably still can't tell and won't be able to for a long time of what goes on behind the scenes. But every day is different, and including in that games environment. A great example was in my role as an executive leader. I could be sitting in a General Assembly forum in a business suit one day, and I could be in shorts and t-shirts in the basement of the village the next, packing pallets and everything in between. You truly became a jack of all trades, regardless of what your day-to-day role was, to essentially get done what we needed to get done to support Team USA. And it was just such a great environment. We had such good team members who really came in with that mantra of, we're going to do whatever it takes. No task is beneath anyone, and working collectively together. So a lot of those events in that environment were some of the most fun and challenging at the same time things we did. I'll share a few little crazy anecdotes. One of my very first international incidents, so to speak, that I had to use my diplomacy skills to help us clean up was back in Sochi in 2014. We had underestimated with the charter company we were using the number of planes we would need to get Team USA and the associated equipment into Sochi. And one of our colleagues had very graciously offered space on our plane to the Canadians and their equipment. And I had to stand on the tarmac of the Munich airport and decide if we were putting the Canadians and their equipment on our plane. Long story short, we put the athletes on the plane. We left their equipment on the tarmac in Munich, and it required a lot of work with our friends at the Canadian Olympic and Paralympic Committee to smooth that over, because their equipment got in a few days later. And those were the sorts of situations that just came up uniquely in that environment, that we would need to deal with every day. But like I said, it was also a lot of fun, and great opportunity to spend time supporting all of Team USA's athletes across every single sport.
Yeah, yeah. When you think about some of the lessons that you learned over your career working in the Olympic Paralympic movement, what are some of those things that translate now into working for Purdue? I mean, one thing that comes to mind is I didn't realize there was also such a philanthropic component with the Olympics. So that one's a natural one, but what are some other things that just translate really well into this line of work?
I think it's generally every skill, Jillian, when I think about it, right? I don't know how many people are familiar with Clifton Strengths Finder, which is one of the many assessments that, right, you can do in the sport world or the business world. Interestingly enough, I've done it 4 or 5 times over the last 25 years, and while my number 3 through number 6 or so strengths on the top 10 have moved around a little bit over the years, my top 2 have always been the same, and number 1 has always been learner, and number 2 has always been responsibility. And I think the learner one's important because in the Olympic and Paralympic world, there was always a new sport. If you had asked me 20 years ago if I would have to learn the rules and regulations of a sport like breaking for Paris, I would have looked at you like you were crazy because, right, we were dealing with swimming and track and field and basketball and hockey and sort of mainstream sports. The sports and the games have changed so much over the last 6 to 8 years. There was always something new to learn, which I'm passionate about. And I think that translates really well to Purdue, right? We're an academic learning environment. We are a massively large campus with a lot of moving parts, always new initiatives, new things going on. So we're all learning something new every day. And I think that responsibility piece is so critical as well. That's sort of a core thing that I have always lived by, taking responsibility. But I think a lot of the traits came from being an athlete and being a student athlete. Simple things like time management and organization, to things that are more critical, like teamwork and loyalty and integrity. Those were instilled in me by every coach I had through the years, including Kathy Wright Eager, who I want to call out because I know she's on the call tonight. Kathy taught all of us more than we realized probably at the time, that are all of these valuable skills that you carry into any career that you're going to have. So whether it's in the Olympic and Paralympic world or at Purdue, I think those skills are just critical for any leader in any area.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good answer. So you mentioned now, just I'm assuming one of your past coaches, which really tees up my next question really well. we're often product of who we work for, who we've been coached by, who we've been mentored by. And as Maria mentioned at the beginning, mentorship is one of the key hallmarks of the Women's Network, as well as many of our other affinity networks. But mentorship is something that we continue to encourage. And I know I myself have been mentored by several women, a few of them also on this call. Yes, Danita and Martha, I'm thinking of you. And I just think it's such an important thing to work with other women, especially who have poured into us and given us their wisdom and their experience and their skill set. I would love to hear how mentorship has played a role in your career and how you believe it's contributed to your professional success.
It's been absolutely critical, right? And the obvious mentors are coaches. When you right when you're an athlete or a student athlete in that environment, by default, your coaches become your mentors. I'll talk a little bit about two mentors I consider close friends and people who really helped shape my career early on in the professional world. Both incidentally are men. There were not a lot of women mentors in the sport world 30 years ago. There's still not a lot today, more today than there were then. But the two of them are wildly different from one another, incidentally enough. And I worked for both of them, so I had both of them as my boss at one point in time in my career. One of them was very methodical and rigid and just came off with a very gruff exterior. And that was just his style. But what he taught me was that sport was a business. And it was really interesting. I would call it the operational, business mentality I learned from him was invaluable. And just learned so many things that I would say are, tactical and operational. My other mentor is a dear, dear friend. I've known him for 30 plus years. He was actually my first boss at the USOPC when I went to work there back in 2003. He is a philanthropist by trade, has also worked in politics and some other positions in the nonprofit world. And he was all about people and the relationships, right? Everything was about forging those relationships and first and foremost, taking care of the people, right? That either work for you, are close to you, are in your network, are important to you. Incidentally, at this point in our careers, he and I have almost flipped roles, and he now calls me for advice versus 20 years ago, I would call him or walk into his office for advice. So that's just an example of that mentor relationship that it truly goes both ways. And it's a lifelong friendship that I'll have with him forever. And I always know I can lean on him for something.
Right, right. So thinking about the fact that we all now have an opportunity to mentor others, and hopefully there are more women that are now being mentored in the sport world, what advice do you have for other women who are aspiring leaders? Maybe they manage one or two people right now, maybe they don't manage anyone, but they're wanting to step into their career, take that next step in their career. What advice do you have for them?
Well, first and foremost is find a mentor, since we just talked about that. But a couple other key things. One of the things I learned in the sport world early on, particularly when I was the only woman at the table or the only woman in the room, was that in order to be respected in that environment, you needed to know what you were talking about, right? So that translates into educate yourself, right? Whatever topic it is, whatever field it is, whatever role it is, make yourself the smartest person in the room. That is always going to serve you really well by being well prepared, being educated, being knowledgeable on the topic at hand. Another thing would be to build your network, right? Whether it's other women, it's peers, it's coworkers, just build that professional network out there. The old adage of it's not what you know, it's who you know, in some professions can really be the key to opening doors or opening up opportunities. So the more you have those relationships and you can leverage those, it's fantastic. And then the last one, and I feel this one is really the most important, is know what your own values are and don't compromise. You need to stick to those. A couple big ones for me are honesty, integrity, trust, responsibility, teamwork. Jillian, you can probably vouch for that based on our leadership conversations around Purdue for Life within our own team. And I've found over the years that if you try to be what someone else wants you to be or expects you to be, right, you're not being genuine. So you've got to know your own values, and then you've got to stick with them in whatever you're doing. And if you don't, I've had times in my career where, based on organizational priorities or how things were going in the Olympic and Paralympic world, so you can imagine there's been a lot of different crises over the years. If you didn't stick to your own values, it just started to eat you up inside, and you weren't doing right by your team or the people you were trying to support. So you really had to stay true to what you believed in.
Mhm. And that's hard because, often we feel like we have to fit a different mold. And so being authentic in a world that often tells us that we need to be something else, that's hard. So I think that's really great advice. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so I'm going to switch modes just a little bit, and we're going to do some lighthearted and some fun questions for you. So some of these will move pretty fast, and then I've got like a speed round for you at the end. And I'm still monitoring, so I'm looking to see that we've got some questions coming in too. So I'll sprinkle those in. But some big important questions, Julie. This one's a big one. Would you say more, boiler up or hammer down? Which one?
Boiler up.
Hammer down. Okay, if you could have dinner with any Boilermaker from from history, so it could be past or present, who would it be and why?
This one's an easy one. John Wooden, right? No surprise there. Significant figure in sports, right? I would have loved to had met him when he was still alive and coaching, just based on his leadership philosophies, his teaching and coaching philosophies. And honestly, I'm a little jealous because my husband did have the opportunity to spend time with Coach Wooden when he was at UCLA, and still actively coaching. And I've heard my husband talk about his time with Coach Wooden, and it makes me a little bit jealous, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're the Boilermaker though, Julie. So just remind him of that. Okay, so during your time traveling for the Olympics and Paralympics, what was the most unforgettable place or experience outside of the games that you experienced?
There are so many, and I had to think about this and narrow it down to just one today. I had the opportunity a little over 20 years ago now to go into Tehran to do sport clinics. It's obviously a place that I am never ever going to be able to go back to in this world in my lifetime, most likely. It was one of the most incredible experiences ever, and I can tell you honestly, I was petrified on the way in, not knowing what to expect. The Iranian Olympic and Paralympic Committee were the most gracious hosts I have ever worked with internationally. They took great care of us. They had a great program, and it was very culturally interesting, obviously. But the really unique part is when we were delivering clinics, right? Normally you would walk in to do a sport clinic. And in this case, I was doing some general sport governance things, which were in a classroom. So that was, a large group of men and women together. And then we were doing some sport specific clinics, and I did the swimming clinic piece of it in the pool. It was split by gender. So I had to deliver the clinic twice, once for the men and a separate time for the women. And because of the cultural, sort of norms in that culture, when I was delivering the clinic for the men, I was on the pool deck, talking, basically word vomit, trying to explain things. And they had one of their Olympic athletes in trying to demo different things that I was talking about. And it was what I would say marginally effective. Then separately, when I went in to do the clinic with the women, they were all coaches or officials. It was completely different, right? We all got in the pool together, did all the skills together. Everybody had fun, and it was just such a unique dynamic, and such a unique environment. But interestingly enough, I am still in touch with some of the staff from that Olympic and Paralympic Committee, right, 20 years later. And when I see them in different meetings or places internationally, they are still just very gracious, right? Forget the politics you read about on the front page of the paper between our two countries. They were some of the most wonderful people I've ever had the opportunity to meet and work with.
Wow. Wow. All right, game day. Would you rather be at Ross Aid or Mackey? Where will we find you cheering the loudest?
Mackie.
What is one hidden talent or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
I am a certified hot yoga instructor and I've been teaching hot yoga for 15 years.
I did not know that.
See? Fun fact that nobody knew.
I like yoga too. Okay, so if you weren't in leadership, what other career would you see yourself having?
International relations or diplomacy.
Hmm. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received from a coach, a teammate, colleague, mentor?
Be genuine and be yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you need to recharge, and I'm going to expand this one a little bit, and you're not in the pool, what's your go-to activity, hobby, or guilty pleasure?
It's not too far away from the pool. Going out on my stand-up paddleboard.
Oh, okay. Okay. It's not really guilty pleasure. That's like still healthy. Do you have a guilty pleasure you want to share?
Maybe my Diet Coke habit.
Diet Coke, yeah. Okay, if you could describe your leadership style as a sport or an event, what would it be?
Okay, so this is an eerie story. This afternoon, knowing that Jillian might ask me this question, I took the phrases and like adjectives I would use to describe my leadership, and I went to our friends at ChatGPT and threw it all in there and said, hey, if this was a sport, what would it be? And what it spit out, it was rowing and specifically an eight, rowing in an eight. Now, the eerie part of that is when I was in graduate school, which was before rowing was an NCAA sport, I rowed in an eight. So it's very freaky. But
That is.
it was a really, really accurate description after ChatGPT spit it out.
That's that. Well, it is intelligent, although artificial. So, okay. So I've got a few quick, just rapid fire questions, and then I'm going to go into the chat and ask a few questions there too. So, boiler gold or black,
Black,
basketball or football,
both.
breakfast at Harry's or dinner at Triple X.
Breakfast at Triple X.
Okay. Good answer. What is your most, well, hold on. Quick follow up to that. Do you ever get that peanut butter burger at Triple X?
No, I get breakfast. I'm a French toast, bacon, pancakes kind of
I,
gal.
yeah, I can't bring myself to eat the peanut butter burger. If you like it, put it in the chat. I'm afraid to eat it. Most used emoji.
I have two, either the smiley face with the sunglasses on or the emoji head banging against the brick wall.
Okay. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Definitely an early bird.
Okay. Tea or coffee?
Neither one. Diet Coke.
What if you had to choose?
Ew.
Like you go somewhere and they only give you those two options.
Coffee, but only if it's disguised as a mocha with a lot of chocolate in it.
Okay, good to know. Book or podcast?
Book.
Online book, like digital book or hand copy?
Both. I prefer hard copy, but for ease of not having 50 books in a travel bag, I do have an online Nook.
Yeah. What's your favorite season in Indiana?
I think now, late summer, early fall.
Yeah. First concert you've ever attended?
Oh, this is going to date me. Winger, Warrant, and Whitesnake.
3 W's. Dream vacation spot?
It's my favorite vacation spot. I can go there over and over again. Moorea in French Polynesia.
Hmm. Okay, I'm a little hesitant to ask this because it's going to really affect our relationship going forward. Are you a dog person or a cat person?
Dogs.
Yes, good. Sorry, cat people. All right. Favorite Olympic sport to watch?
So my politically correct answer for the last 30 years has been all of them. But if I had to pick, it would be and I can't pick swimming. We'll just put that out right now, right? So besides swimming, it would be surfing in the summer games and alpine skiing in the winter games.
Mm,
And my brother was an alpine skier, so I've got a little bit of family loyalty there.
okay. And then one word your friends would use to describe you.
Generous.
Good. All right. Well, these were my questions. So let's see what questions you all have. So I'm looking here in the chat and I'm going to take these in just random order. What was the last book you read?
Right now, I am reading a biography by John Sullivan, who was the U.S. ambassador to Moscow when the Ukraine war kicked off a couple of years ago. I'm about halfway through it. Really interesting.
Wow. That's deep. How was your Many may not know that you still swim competitively. I did not know this. How was your swim in Chicago last weekend?
Did Danita ask that?
He did.
It was great. The water was not as cold as expected. It was 68 to 70. The waves were not the 7 to 9 feet that they predicted. It was 1 to 2 feet, and it was perfect.
And
So
that was a
it was great.
competitive swim. That wasn't just a fun swim.
It was a competitive swim. It's a big open water swim in Chicago, and I actually did a relay with a friend of mine. So we both did 2.5K. We finished pretty well. All the relays were lumped together, so we were competing against it was men and women. So we were in the top like quarter out of 100 relays. But I'll do a little bragging. I had the fastest women's split in those relays, so I was pretty proud of that. And there was
Nice.
a former national team athlete on one of those relays, and my split was 1 second faster than hers. So, and
Congratulations.
she's about 30 years younger than me, so I'll take it.
Ooh, way to make us proud, Julie. Okay, what's one of your proudest moments that had the biggest impact on other people?
I think it would be in 2018 when I was at the USOPC. We got to the culmination of an 8-year plan that we had put in place in 2010 after Vancouver in an effort to win the Winter Games medal count. And it was one of those situations where we put all of our effort into the process and the pieces that needed to be put in place, but everything still had to go right. We couldn't have anything go sideways or any crises happen. And interestingly enough, this is an Olympic Paralympic fun fact. Medal counts are predicted behind the scenes and they're held very tightly. So they never get out in the press. And we had predicted 36 medals and we won exactly 36 medals. And the impact that had on athletes, staff, coaches, right? Every member of Team USA was phenomenal and really just couldn't be replicated.
Mhm. Wow. How difficult is it to enter the sports industry if you don't have direct experience in sports, but have many transferable skills for back-end administrative work, leadership, etc.?
I don't think it's all that difficult. Part of it is getting like the hardest part I think is getting a foot in the door. And when I talk to students now, in fact, I just had a coffee with a student here on campus at Purdue this week who's interested in getting into sport. I always encourage them get in with an internship or just get your foot in the door at a position. It might not be what your ideal is in the long term, but as long as you can get yourself in and you get in and you do a good job, you're going to maneuver your way through, right, the system, whether it's pro sports, Olympic and Paralympic sports, collegiate sports. Um, Certainly, having sport background helps. And honestly, in all of my years, having background as an athlete was more valuable than having a sport management degree or, call it theoretical, right? Theoretical knowledge and experience. We actually would put more weight when we hired at the USOPC on someone who was an athlete at any level, right? College, high school, Olympic, Paralympic caliber, pro caliber, didn't matter. If they had experience as an athlete, that tended to outweigh somebody coming in who just had never participated in sports at any level.
Right. Interesting. What are two of the biggest changes you've noticed at Purdue since returning? Because you were a student, I mean, that's been a long time ago, but you've still been involved throughout the years. So, what's a change that you noticed when you came to Purdue full time as a staff member?
I think, I mean, obviously the growth of campus, but I saw that a little bit, over the years as I was coming back. I think just the diversity in the student body is wildly different now than it was 20 or 30 years ago. Right? We are sort of what I term a small, like very culturally diverse, international community on campus now. So that's very different. I think the other thing is how much the community around campus has grown. One of my favorite things is food, which is why I still swim all the time so that I can eat all the time. And, I came from a metro area in Colorado Springs that was 1 million+ people, good sized city, and we were totally a food desert. We called it fast food, or chain food central out there. I have been like so excited to go around town and just try all the restaurants around town, get out and experience the community. And that's so different than when I was here as a student as well.
Okay, so I've got to ask then, what restaurants have you been enjoying?
Ooh, we, John and I get in a rut, so we find places we like and we go over and over again. So our standbys are Bert's Place downtown for pizza,
Okay,
Ripple, East End, Nom Nom, Red Seven, Black Sparrow, Triple X. We actually also like the West Side Diner for breakfast. So if anybody's into
that
diner
is good.
breakfast, West Side Diner, the Bryant, those are probably where we've gone over and over again.
Yeah,
But we're
yeah,
always up for trying something new.
nice. All right, so people are interested in some more personal questions like, what show are you watching right now? Thanks, Michelle.
We're not watching anything right now.
No,
Yeah.
nothing.
I mean, other than turning on live sports, right? Or news, I don't think we've watched anything recently.
Okay, this next one is kind of a funny question. I'll break it down because it's kind of a multi-part. What's your favorite podcast if you listen to podcasts? So we'll stop with that one and then I'll do the next part.
I don't listen to podcasts very often, but I will say during the pandemic, when things were sort of crazy and there was a period of time when we were on lockdown and there was no pool to swim in. I couldn't go to the gym. I ended up doing a lot of hiking because that was one of the great things about being in Colorado at the time is you could get outside and go hiking. And a couple of my coworkers at the time recommended some podcasts. And if I had to narrow it down to my favorite ones, it's the ESPN 30 for 30 podcasts. And some of them are like a single 45-minute hour podcast. Others are a series on different sports topics, but those were my favorites.
Okay. Do you have a hype song?
I don't think so.
No, nothing that gets you grooving?
Uh, Probably a lot of different songs, but I don't have just one.
Okay. And then this is a really bizarre question. It's from Maria. So she wants to know if you've ever swam next to a whale shark.
Whale shark? No. Dolphins? Yes.
Okay.
I've paddleboarded with a lot of sharks.
Sharks or whale sharks? Or just in general?
Sharks, not a whale shark.
Okay.
Reef sharks, nurse sharks, lemon
Guess it
sharks,
wasn't such a silly question. Ooh. What's your favorite Chicago pizza?
pequods.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, this is a serious question. What do you see in the future for Purdue for Life?
I see a lot of opportunity. We have done a lot over the last year to focus on our internal Purdue for Life team, right? Getting them set up for success with career development pathways and putting some framework and structures in place to sustain the organization into the future. And I think having a team that is so passionate about doing what's best for Purdue is really, really fantastic. And I feel like everybody is on board with that and right in the organization for the right reasons. Everyone's here to do what's right for Purdue. So, where the university wants to go is going to guide us at Purdue for Life a little bit. Right now, the priorities are the 4 pillars, the campaign, the Victories and Heroes or Heroines. I like that Maria said earlier, campaign that we soft launched in Naples and will kick off, full swing at homecoming this year. So those are really, really big things that we can look forward to in the future.
For some of us who might not know what those 4 pillars are, can you mention those briefly?
Yes, One Health, Purdue Computes, Purdue Indianapolis, and the Daniels School of Business.
Great. And we'll hear more about all of those, especially at homecoming. So if you're not signed up for homecoming, quick plug, you will want to come to homecoming. There are so many amazing things that are happening, and that is the official launch and unveiling of our Victories and Heroes campaign. So you'll see more about those 4 pillars there. I'm going to end on a note that I think you'll be interested in too, Julie, is a question that we get from Hannah, and she is saying, where do you see the most growth or change for Purdue athletics in the next 5 years or so?
I think with the House settlement and NIL coming into play, the hope is certainly that the athletics world will stabilize a little bit. Look, I said hope intentionally. I think there's still potentially a lot of changes that could happen, but there's certainly a lot of opportunity, right, with the NIL changes to support student athletes in different ways than we've seen before. Roster caps came into play, but there's pros and cons to that, right? The con is that you've got student athletes who are no longer able to potentially walk onto a team like you used to have in the past. The pro is that those student athletes who are on those teams are getting greater resources and greater support than they potentially did in the past. I'm actually, keeping a close eye on what's happening with what are termed Olympic sports in the collegiate space, knowing that a lot of the revenue goes to football and basketball, and rightfully so, because those are your revenue generators. But I think there's a lot of unique opportunities. There are some conferences out there talking about venture capitalism, which is not a conversation that's ever happened before with the NCAA. And the NCAA has historically been a very slow to move organization, I think is the way I describe it, right? A lot of governance layers, a lot of red tape, so to speak, and they have had to adapt and evolve in this environment as well. So time will tell, but I think there's a lot of potential benefits, provided that we can sustain Olympic and women's sports in that NCAA space, as the revenue streams diversify and start to stabilize a little bit.
Good, good. Well, Julie, thank you so much for taking some time to answer not only my questions, but also the many questions that we saw in the chat. This was fun. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else learned a lot about you as well. Do you have any final words that you'd like to share with our group?
I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining tonight. These chats are always fun. I love joining to listen to other speakers as well, and it's been an honor to be here tonight with you, Jillian, to share and answer everyone's questions. So just thank you and have a great rest of your evening.